Tonight, on the eve of his face-to-face with Vladimir Putin, is Donald Trump being bold or naive?
I think President Putin will make peace.
Plus, the Jekyll and Hyde economy takes a concerning turn to the dark side. Also, the feds crash Gavin Newsom's event as schools spend their first day setting up safe zones against ICE. And the California governor declares war on Trump's power play.
They want to rig these elections,
but may encounter famous resistance back home. Live at the table, Batya Ungar-Sargon, Tiffany Cross, Arthur Aidala, Aftyn Behn, and Terry Moran. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do. Good evening, I'm Phillip in New York. Let's get right to what America's talking about. Are the goalposts moving? We are now less than 24 hours away from President Trump's historic summit with Vladimir Putin. It will be the first time in more than 6 years that the two leaders have met face to face. But according to Trump, this isn't the high-stakes meeting that he and his team have been teasing for days. It's actually the next one that we need to look out for.
I think that President Putin would like to see a deal. I think if I weren't president, he would take over all of Ukraine. Tomorrow, all I want to do is set the table for the next meeting, which should happen shortly. I'd like to see it happen very quickly, very shortly after this meeting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting.
And after months of campaigning on ending Russia's war with Ukraine on day one, Trump is now lowering expectations even further.
Scenario where Donald Trump will look at this meeting in Alaska and say, this was not worth it, I failed.
Yeah, 25%. This meeting sets up the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be very, very important because that's going to be a meeting where they make a deal, and I don't want to use the word divvy things up, but, you know, to a certain extent, it's not a bad term, okay? But there will be a give and take as to boundaries, lands, et cetera, et cetera.
That is music to Vladimir Putin's ears, that they will be divvying things up, shifting boundaries, trading land. And Trump is also now not trying to lower expectations in a lot of ways for this meeting. Is he changing the goalposts?
He is, and I think it's partly a result of a misunderstanding that happened when his negotiator, Steve Witkoff, went over to meet with Vladimir Putin. Witkoff doesn't like to use State Department interpreters, so he uses Putin's. And he came back and he said, Putin wants to trade 2 provinces. He'll keep 2, and Ukraine needs to not join NATO and the rest of it. And Trump announced we're going to have land swaps. We have a deal. It's on the table. And it turns out he didn't understand what he was being told, or Putin's interpreter was fooling him. This was reported in German press and in the Danish press. And so now they kind of have to improvise. Well, there's going to be another meeting. There's going to be another meeting. And it is, at the very least, chaotic, if not incompetent, which is not surprising.
But the stakes are high, Batya. I mean, he has set up this summit with Putin, which is A, what Putin wants, B, he's already said there's going to be a joint press conference, which is another thing Putin really wants, putting him on another playing field with a United States president, which Russia hasn't been on that playing field in some time. Is Trump just going to wing it on this situation when there's, I mean, really the fate of the globe at stake in a lot of ways?
Well, it's not just Trump who wants this meeting. I want this meeting because I want this war to end. And the war is not going to end until Putin has a sit down with Donald Trump. There is going to be land swaps because Crimea is at this point de facto part of Russia. It's not going back to Ukraine. And the Donbass at the start of this war was also not part of Ukraine. It was under a civil war and it had declared itself an independent republic. And so if Zelensky cannot accept those 2 facts, there's really nothing to talk about. Trump saying that the real meeting is the one that includes Vladimir Zelensky, that is new. And that is a recognition on Donald Trump's part that he cannot give away Ukrainian land in order to end this. That shows a real maturity in his thinking that I had not heard before, and so I was happy to hear that.
I would just say that I was there in 2014. Okay, the Donbass referendum was not free and fair. There were Russian troops on the ground at that time. I was in Crimea as well. My question is, why would anyone trust a word that Vladimir Putin says?
Right.
He said, I'm not going into Crimea. They were there. Yeah, he masses his troops on the borders of Ukraine. He says, they're making it up that I'm going to invade. He invades. Why would anyone do a deal with this?
That's why it's more of a symbolic victory for Vladimir Putin to even be on the stage with him. He is a would-be dictator, is talking to a dictator. He's given really no concessions, and he's rewarded with an audience from the President of the United States. And so far, we have seen nothing. He always tackles on this issue as well. He chickens out at the same time. The constantly capitulating, it feels like to me, Beltway media looked at him and he said, because he said bullshit. And then all of a sudden that was the big, ooh, he's got tough talk. But what does that mean? What does a tough talk mean if you can't bust a grape in a fruit fight, if you're just saying all these things about him, but you're not actually following up on anything? They spoke in July. He always has these deadlines that don't mean anything. After they spoke in July, what happened? Putin pummeled Ukraine with over 530 drone strikes, and the war still continued. So they're being vague about the goals here, because if you're vague about the goals, if you don't have any tangible metrics for success, then you can't, according to him, he won't have failed.
There's probably a lot of that strategy happening where they don't want to even say what the objective is, because if they say that, then they have to be measured by it. But there's also a huge question mark about what Trump's actual position on Russia is right now. This is actually to your point. Has there been a shift? European allies, according to CNN, say that the one who has changed so far is Trump, both in his level of comfort in his job and in his understanding of Putin. His approach in early January was naive, says one U.S. official. Now Europeans say he finally gets it, that Putin is a murderous leader. Do you buy that?
I think this is an excellent opportunity to talk about Trump's ego, which he has prioritized over our national security. And when that happens, Putin wins and the American people lose. And Abby, I would just like to say that I do not trust Donald Trump to be in a room with Vladimir Putin, because he will give away the store.
Well, he has said, and we acknowledge that he can't give away the store, and he won't give away this. He said, I will not concede anything without Zelensky being there. But I just want to touch on a question you asked a moment ago. Is he going to wing it? I am certainly not comparing myself to the President of the United States. However, my job as a criminal defense attorney is constantly negotiating with people who have a lot more power than I do. The United States of America, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Office. What Trump said in the Oval Office, I'll know in 2 or 3 minutes whether it's going to be a good meeting or not a good meeting. That happened to me yesterday. You could tell right away. You could tell by body language. You could tell if they're coming to the table in good faith and they really want to resolve something, or if they're just throwing you a bone because they feel like they have to. So to a degree, you have to wing it. There is no script. Yeah. You have to use, and here's where Donald Trump, and I concede the ego, but he's been negotiating his whole life. He is not George W. Bush. He's not George H.W. Bush. His whole life has been negotiating. That's how he's gotten to, whether it's negotiating the contract for The Apprentice or negotiating buying a building. So he is a good negotiator, and I think you have to do this face to face. You can't phone it in.
No,
I don't phone in the prosecutor and say, hey, I know my guy's facing life. Can you give him 25 years? I say, can I come in and sit down and talk to you?
Negotiating a contract for The Apprentice is very different than negotiating for
It is the same skill set.
There is something perhaps to what Arthur is saying, which is that, first of all, you need to get people to the room. And there are two sides to this. So let me read you one version of this interaction between Trump and Putin, according to a Russia expert. He says, Trump thinks he can look into Putin's eyes and get a deal. He believes his own talents as a negotiator. The problem is that Putin has been doing this his whole life and is going into this summit with the idea that he can manipulate Trump. So who is manipulating who? Okay. Because I do think, Putin is a former KGB officer. He really does know his stuff when it comes to manipulating people.
This is what I think is happening.
Trump, though, I think I'm just going to give him a little bit of credit here. I think Trump understands that Putin also, Putin has an ego too. He wants to be at that podium with Trump. He's going to come into this meeting perhaps with maybe feeling like he has an upper hand, which might be just the thing that Trump needs in order to get him to the table.
So from the start of this war, there has been sort of two ways to view Vladimir Putin. Okay, in one view, he's a murderer, a dictator, and a madman who doesn't believe that Ukraine exists as a separate country. He wants to be Peter the Great. He wants to restore the Soviet Union. In the other view of things, he is a murderer and a dictator, but he is not a madman. He is thinking logically, and he had a legitimate concern about Western influence on what he considers to be his buffer zone, and that he really had a legitimate reason to think that Ukraine was going to be included in NATO, and that that would be a threat to Russia. Now, in the second reading, which has been my reading from the beginning, and I believe also President Trump's reading from the beginning, this person who is a logical thinker would take an off-ramp as soon as it is offered, because he's thinking logically.
See,
and so
that's where I think you lose a lot of people,
And I think
right?
with Donald Trump, as with me, with every month since he was elected that Putin has refused to come to the table, Trump has been sort of steadily moving from that second category into the first. Tomorrow's meeting is Putin's last chance to prove to Trump that he is a logical actor and wants to bring an end to this.
Maybe. I saw you responding somehow. I mean, I'm curious what you think, because I definitely think if you were paying attention in those months right after Putin sent those tanks into Ukraine, he was very clear that this is about his view of Russian empire. That is not a made-up thing. He has said it himself.
He's been telling us this for almost 20 years.
Yes.
He thought the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. Set aside the Holocaust, it was the collapse of the Soviet Union, one of the worst tyrannies in the history of humankind. And there's something about Trump and Putin from the beginning. I was in Helsinki as well. Trump is an alpha male in every room he walks into until Vladimir Putin is there. I was there. You could feel it in the room. Now, I'm not saying that Putin has anything on him, but I think there's no question that he has trouble with this guy, and Putin having a rational...
Sounds like Russiagate hoax to me. I don't know.
I didn't believe in the Russiagate
I don't think it has anything to do with Russia. It's more of an interpersonal thing between the two of them, and you can't explain
when Kislyak was in the Oval Office. I mean, that's not speculation. That's something that happened. So there is something nefarious, and even I have to respectfully disagree. I think you can call him an alpha male, depending on your definition of what an alpha male is. He's not an alpha male to me. He's an insecure, very insecure little person.
And I just want to reiterate something you said, that Putin has been playing the long game for 10 to 15 years, and Trump has become the most perfect tool in his agenda.
Yeah, we're going to leave it there, guys.
Who he didn't take
We're going to leave it there,
catastrophe
guys.
for Russia.
Coming up next for us, new